Just want to introduce myself first. I'm Dominic King, the Ostomy coach. This is a brand new channel, so welcome to the channel. Now, I've been on Instagram for a short while, just literally, well, a couple of days really. I've started an account over there. I've got a Facebook page and I've got a Facebook group, all called the Ostomy Coach. So if you would like to check out some of those, you can. You may be here because of those, or because of you've been on Instagram and see me waffling on, so you thought you'd come over here and hear me waffle on a bit longer. Now, that's the point of the YouTube channel, really. I'm just I'm setting this up just so I can kind of talk a little bit more in depth, rather than just giving snippets of information or snippets of advice. This is just so you can kind of get a little bit more detail, either on me, my story, and possibly so I can talk a little bit more in depth about maybe how to tackle problems and stuff like that. Primarily, this is what the channel's about, trying to give people some value, help people out. I've just started up as an online coach. As I said on Instagram, I am new to online coaching, but I have been coaching for many years as a martial arts coach. I'm a judo and MMA coach, and I was a high level judo athlete for many years, so I'm no stranger to coaching in general. I have coached people one-to-one on mindset and stuff like that. I've studied mindset for many years. Again, over a decade I've been studying mindset, and that's without the kind of work that I did with sports psychologists and stuff when I was actually competing as a judo athlete. So that all helped, but I actually went deep into the study of the psychology and mindset and happiness and all that sort of thing. I sort of did that in my own time, and I love doing that. So I really like the thought of helping people. I really like the thought of working one-to-one, to dig deep into people's problems and help them with their issues, and make them a better person, basically. Pass on some of my own experiences, which obviously are probably similar to a lot of you. Just a little bit of background on me. Obviously, like I said, I was a high-level judo athlete. I was on the British squad. I was a youth Olympic silver medalist back in 1995 as a 17-year-old. Was a junior and senior British champion. So I had realistic goals of possibly going to the senior Olympics. That was my main goal. And then in 2005, I got ulcerative colitis. End of the year before, I think I got food poisoning, Campylobacter, I think it was called, and I was very sort of poorly for a couple of weeks. Come back from that, but then I never really felt the same. I kind of felt as though I had some stomach issues, something not quite right in there. And then I got another bout of diarrhea, which I just thought was just just a sickness and diarrhea bug, but it turned out it was a little bit more serious, and it gradually got worse and worse. I went to the doctor and they just said it was irritable bowel, or a bug. I can't remember exactly what they said initially, but they sent me away. And then a couple of weeks I was still suffering, so I went back, and the doctor kind of said, it's probably not too serious. Take some other medication. I can't remember what they gave me, but they gave me something to try and maybe settle it. And I went away again, still no joy. I was obviously still suffering. Maybe a week or a couple of weeks later, I went back again. And I did actually tell them at that point that we had a little bit of a background in the family of ulcerative colitis. My dad had ulcerative colitis back in the 80s, which gradually got worse and worse, and he ended up having an ileostomy bag, which is permanent. He's still got it to this day. He's now in his 70s, 76 right now, and he's still got the ileostomy. So it was in the family, and I, because obviously I started to get worse and worse, I kind of started to think that it was possibly that I was possibly, you know, going down the ulcerative colitis route, and I kind of felt that it was, you know, it was possibly getting worse and worse to the point that it may actually be a case of me being in the same situation as my dad. And that did actually scare me a little bit, if I'm honest, because, you know, not because for the reasons that maybe it was for some of you, that, you know, having a bag, you might look different, and you might, you know, that's going to affect you in ways to maybe, you know, with dating and, you know, finding a relationship. I was already in a real good relationship, steady relationship, still in the same relationship now. I'm married to my wife, and we've been together for a good number of years. So so I never really had that issue, but I did have the issue of my sport. My issue was that I was a high level athlete, and it depended, you know, everything depended on being well and being healthy and, you know, being tip top shape, so I could obviously train and compete at the highest level. And for those of you who have done judo, especially if you've done judo at a good level, you will know how tough judo is. It probably is genuinely one of the toughest sports on the planet. A lot of you might think boxing or MMA is the toughest sport on the planet, but I know a lot of judo athletes, high-level judo athletes, who went down the MMA route, and they reckon the judo training was harder than MMA. So that shows how hard judo is physically anyway. And obviously I needed to be well for that. So for me, getting ill with ulcerative colitis was more than an inconvenience. It was life-changing. So it was in my interest to get to the doctors again and try and sort it out. But, you know, again, they kind of fobbed me off, sent me away with some more medication, and they did suggest that it may be ulcerative colitis, but I just had to wait and see what happened. Again, gradually got worse and worse. I ended up competing in a competition which was a fight-off for the World Championships in judo, because I was still training and still competing. And I think it was the top 13, 14 people in Great Britain who were fighting off to go to the World Championships, which was going to be in Egypt that year in 2005. I was, at that particular time, one of the favourites to win, because I had beaten more or less all the top contenders, and the, you know, couple of people who were maybe ahead of me for a few years before, you know, had moved on. They'd just retired. So I was probably one of the favourites to win and then go to the World Championships, which then may have then led on to an Olympic qualification and stuff like that. But as it turned out, I went to the qualifying competition. On the morning of the competition, I was sat on the toilet. 4 times I went to the toilet before I even competed. Lots of blood. Many of you could probably relate to this. When I tell this story, a lot of the time, a lot of people are a little bit kind of don't want to hear it, but obviously a lot of you guys will be able to relate to this, and you'll know exactly what that's like. It takes a lot out of you. I felt very lethargic, and that was before I even got on the mat, before I even started warming up. And out of all of those people in the competition, I ended up coming 4th, which, you know, isn't a bad result considering how bad I felt. I scraped for every round, scraped myself off the mat, scraped myself back on the mat, you know, just really scraped through every fight, and ended up coming 4th, which wasn't what I was there for. But in hindsight, it was probably quite a good result. Now, I wanted to win the gold medal. The guy who won the gold medal I'd beaten 3 times, and he ended up going to 2 Olympics. So, you know, he ended up doing very well and stuff. Number 6 in the world, I think he was at one point. But I'd beaten the guy 3 times, and I felt like I'd kind of been robbed of my opportunity a little bit. But in hindsight, it ended up that the World Championships, which took place in the, I think it was the October, the September, I think it was, of 2005, I was actually sat in a hospital bed. So had I have actually won that qualifying competition, I would have had to have sat out anyway. I was actually sat in a hospital bed. at the time when the competition took place. So I was obviously less worried at that point about competing in the World Championships and more worried about actually my health in general. You know, it was quite scary at that point. Yeah, a lot of you, like I say, would be able to relate to that. Now, the situation which actually put me in hospital was sort of a 24-hour toilet-a-thon where I was on the toilet about 30 times in one day. And obviously it's 24 hours in a day, so you can do the sums on that and work out that I was pretty much on the toilet for a whole day. And obviously with that comes sleep deprivation. There's obviously fatigue, not just because of the time that you're sat on the toilet, but obviously you're constantly losing fluids and you're worried and anxious and stuff like that. So that takes a toll on the body, as like I said, as many of you will be able to relate to. So I've been to the toilet 30 times, lots of blood every time. My wife was on the phone to the doctor and they said, you need to get in and see us. I was concerned about getting in to see them at the doctor's because I didn't think I was going to make it. I think my wife had to lend me some sanitary pads or something like that to stick in my underwear just to try and make it to the doctor. When I got to the doctor's surgery, I was straight on the toilet immediately before I actually saw the doctor. And then the doctor said, you need to be transferred to the local hospital, which obviously then it was the same situation, go to the toilet, quickly make it over to the hospital before I had to go to the toilet again. And they told me at that point, you're probably going to have to stay overnight. And I was gutted, if I'm honest. The thoughts of staying in hospital overnight was tough to me, which is laughable now because it ended up being 5 weeks from that point. And had I known what I was about to go through, one night would have seemed like a doddle. But yeah, I mean, obviously that first night was a bit of an ordeal in itself. I felt like it was tough. I didn't like the thought of being sick. I didn't like the thought of being away from home. I didn't like the thought of maybe sleeping in a place where sick people were and people had died. You know, that just kind of didn't sit well with me. So that first night was a tough night. And the plan was to stick me on drugs, some oral steroids to start with. Didn't make any impact whatsoever. I was then put on to intravenous drugs, steroids, and yeah, I mean, that kind of settled me down a little bit. That did help to an extent, but not enough that it was really kind of bringing me back to where I needed to be. Did make some kind of progress. So at that point, when I'd kind of settled to some extent, they then put me back onto the oral steroids, which then just kicked everything off again. And all of a sudden I'm back on the toilet. And, you know, I think they'd done this another 2 or 3 times before they come to the conclusion, this was a couple of weeks in, that it's, you know, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to settle for an ileostomy, which I did know a bit about, obviously, because, as I said, my dad had been in that situation a number of years ago. So I knew what a bag looked like. I knew how they worked. So in that sense, I guess I was kind of a little bit more prepared than some, but maybe a little bit more scared because I knew what that meant. I knew exactly what that life meant. And that was a little bit of a kick in the teeth. Well, it was a lot, really. It was obviously, as many of you will relate to, and it felt like it was not just life changing. It felt almost like my life was over, if I'm perfectly honest. Not least because my life was as an athlete. My life was constantly trying to hit these limits and hit and hit these targets that, you know, required being super fit, super healthy. You know, I was super fit at the time. I was, you know, a real low body fat percentage. My heart rate, resting heart rate was, I think, at one time about 34. So I was a fit athlete, and all of a sudden I'm sick, really sick, and that felt almost like I say, not life-changing, but my life was over. I felt like, am I going to live very long? Am I going to end up kind of being somebody who dies young? Am I going to see my kids grow up? Is this going to be so bad that I don't get through this, that I might actually die when they are kind of doing their procedures and stuff? It was all going through my head, and it was scary. Now, obviously, because of my background as a martial artist, I'd been through a lot of tough times, a lot of tough training, a lot of tough situations where I'd had to dig deep, and you know, a lot of that is about having a good mindset and a positive mindset and a good attitude. So, you know, I entered that situation really as best I could, and I kind of tried to turn it around in my head as best I could at the time. At the time, I had no real knowledge of mindset like I do now. My knowledge of mindset now is massively advanced in comparison to what it was back then, but I still kind of wanted to approach it with that mental toughness, thinking that, yeah, this is not going to beat me, this is going to be, you know, I'm going to have a good attitude, I'm not going to complain, blah blah blah. And that was how I approached it. But while I was in hospital, as I said, there was a lot of things to contend with. Not only had my life been turned upside down, the food was not good. You know, I had all sorts of issues. Eventually, I lost a lot of weight. When I actually come out of hospital, I was 53.5 kilograms, which, when you consider that I went in at 66 kilograms, because that was the weight category I used to fight at, under 66 kilograms, that's a lot of weight. So I'm not sure what that is in pounds, but for those of you who work in pounds, but you could probably put that into Google and you'll find out that that's a lot of weight, especially when, like I said, I had maybe a body percentage of about, a body fat percentage of about, I don't know, at the very most 7, 8. It's probably sometimes maybe 4, 5%, and now I was losing weight, and there was no real excess weight to lose, which meant I was just losing muscle. And when I come out of hospital, I ended up looking like a skeleton. Couldn't even sit on a hard chair. I felt that kind of depleted and wasted. You know, my body had wasted virtually to nothing, to bones almost. Yeah, I had a tough time. But while I was in hospital, I had some situations which weren't ideal. You know, like while I was waiting for my operation, I had a guy who come in who was in my little bay in the hospital. He was a drug addict and an alcoholic, I think, and he was obviously, they were trying to get him off the drugs, and he one night he smashed the upstairs window of the hospital, and he jumped out of the window, upstairs window, and I was in that bay. So that was a bit of an ordeal, and obviously a lot of us have to contend with maybe the slightly dodgy hospital food, and there was people on my ward who had died, and then there was the situation with my own operation where it appeared that it had gone really, really well, and the surgeon come to visit me. He said, first of all, you had the best torso that I've ever had the pleasure of cutting into. I didn't quite know how to take that. I think it was a compliment, but just after he said that, I think he accidentally put his foot on the lever on my bed that you use when somebody has a cardiac arrest and you have to drop them down real quick to obviously give them CPR, and he caught his foot or his knee or something on that lever. And I am, bearing in mind my stomach has just been opened up and then stapled back together. I shot down from I don't know what kind of an angle I was at, but I was in a sat up position, and all of a sudden, within a split second, I'm flat on my back. And obviously I didn't say oh dear. I think I said some kind of a few words that maybe I shouldn't repeat on here, and that hurt a little bit, stung a little bit, if I'm honest. Now I look back and I laugh because it is funny. Actually, looking back, it is a funny story to tell, but at the time, you know, it felt like just as everything had gone wrong, it couldn't get any worse, and the surgeon dropped me. And then, to make matters worse, again, I was, you know, I had this attitude, I'm going to get back as soon as I can. I'm going to start training with this. I don't care. So I wanted to get my strength back up. I wanted to get strong. I wanted to not lose any more weight. So I started eating. And because of that, I then got myself a blockage. Got a blockage, which then was extremely painful. Gradually got worse and worse until at one point I was screaming out in pain in the night. And you know, because of my martial arts background and being used to taking a few knocks and stuff, I felt that I had quite a high pain threshold. But in that situation, it was horrendous, and it was not just something that was a sudden pain. It was a long drawn out pain where this went on for many hours in a row, and it just got too much, and the pain was horrendous. And they ended up having to put me in a side room, and they ended up giving me, they kind of basically had to stick a tube down my throat and get it up that way, and clear the blockage that way, which was one of the worst experiences of my life, if I'm perfectly honest. Having a tube stuffed down my throat while I was awake, it was horrendous. And some of you again may be able to relate to this, and had a similar experience. It was awful. I, you know, had a blood clot later on as well. That was actually in my neck surgery when they were setting up ready for the JPouch. I had a blood clot, and that was awful as well. Again, sort of emergency surgery. So I'd come out of the surgery, that everything had gone well initially, and then I was back in for emergency surgery. And yeah, things just seemed to be going from bad to worse, and I kind of was struggling mentally a little bit, because I just felt like I was being so unlucky, and things did get on top of me a little bit. I didn't really show it, if I'm honest. I was quite positive, outwardly positive, when people are around, but inwardly I was just, I was struggling quite badly. Looking back, I always say I couldn't go through it again. If somebody offered me £1 million, I don't know if I would take it to go through it again. I really don't think I could. It's really difficult to even think about it, let alone experience it. However, now this is the part of the story that maybe many of you need to hear. If I could go back, and before this ever happened, somebody comes to me and says, you don't ever have to experience that. You can go through another door. All right, so you've got a choice of two doors. This door takes you in on the route that you actually went down, the surgery and the life that you had after that. Or you can go through another door. You never have to experience that. You can go down another route. You'll always stay healthy, certainly bowel wise anyway, and you'll go on a different route. I would now looking back, I would not change anything. The fact that it kind of finished my judo career to some extent, the fact that I've ended up with scars on my body, just like many of you, the fact that I've had to cope with a life with a bag at one point, and now with a JPouch, which basically means I'm going to the toilet more than the average person, you know, a number of times a day. It is quite inconvenient at times, it is tough at times, but I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it. And the reason I wouldn't change it, I wouldn't change anything, is because of what it's given me through the journey, the experience that's given me, and the mental toughness that you can draw from that is so valuable. And this is really the point of the video, is you know, everything that you may have gone through. So I'm telling you my story now, but anything that you may have gone through that is similar to me, please just don't see that as a negative. Use it as fuel, use it as a positive, use it as the thing that you look back on when things get tough in life. Know that is, you know, that is the thing that is actually going to help you. And that's the thing that maybe you've got over a lot of people, because most people maybe in certain situations wouldn't be able to cope, but you will, because you know that you've been through tougher times. You know that you can cope with things that are difficult and things that maybe you think at the time you're not going to get through, but you know that you'll get through it because you've got through this. So I actually now look at the situation, look at the whole experience as a positive. I love the fact that I've had an ileostomy. I love the fact that I've now got a JPouch. I love the fact that I dealt with ulcerative colitis, because things that are uncomfortable to most people are not uncomfortable to me. You know, if I ever, let's say for example, I said about the hospital earlier, staying overnight in a hospital. If I ever had an operation that might be unrelated and I had to stay overnight in hospital, it would be an absolute doddle for me. So the tough times, the things that were difficult at the time, makes things that are tough later on, it makes everything easier. It makes everything much easier. You know, while I was, I mean, this is another thing, while I was actually in hospital having my initial surgery, my wife was heavily pregnant as well. We'd been together for a number of years, but she was pregnant with our first child, Ryan, who's now 17. And yeah, and she obviously not only had to cope with that, not only had to cope with the tiredness that comes with pregnancy, and she was still at work at the time, I think, and she had to deal with the situation that I was in. She had to help me along. She had to support me. So that was really tough as well. And me knowing that she had to go through that was really, really tough. But also, again, when it then later on, you know, when most people are struggling with a sleep deprivation that comes with having a child, you know, when people talk about like, oh, I was up 3 times last night feeding the child or whatever, for me, that was quite normal. It didn't seem like a tough, I mean, it did, yeah, don't get me wrong, it was tough, you know, bringing up a child is tough, but the whole stage with a baby, for me, seemed fairly normal, because at that particular time, this was still, you know, new after I'd come out of my, my surgery had happened sort of like in the 2005. I got out of hospital in the early October. Ryan then came along in the December. So I was still in the phase where I was getting up at night and you know, struggling to sleep through the night because I had to go to the toilet. So getting up for the toilet was no different to getting up to feeding a child, you know, which, to be fair, I didn't really have to do initially because my wife breastfed, but I was still up supporting her and stuff like that, and I wanted to kind of give back to her a little bit because she had supported me so much during my time in hospital. Even though that was really tough, because obviously at that point I was still, you know, very tired and very lethargic. I was still very, very light in comparison to what I was when I went into hospital. So yeah, it was tough, but like I say, I love the fact that I've had that experience, and I love the fact that I'm now still in a situation where I've got the JPouch, because I see it as my superpower. I put some videos on Instagram recently, and talking about, you know, obviously a lot quicker than what I'm doing now. I'm kind of waffling a little bit now, but for me, I use the whole situation. I use this is my superpower. Some people are victims. Some people see it as a real inconvenience, and some people like me and hopefully like you, they see it as their superpower. That is the thing that actually takes them to the next level. It's the thing that it doesn't stop them, it actually helps them, it fuels them. So okay, so this video has now been half an hour. I don't want to keep waffling on because there's so much I can talk about in terms of my own story, and I don't want to make this channel all just about me. I want to make it I want to make it as a valuable tool for you to help you through the tough times. So I'm going to leave the video here, and I will be making lots and lots of videos in the future, hopefully, and hopefully I can give you some value, help you out. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm the Ostomy Coach. I'm Dominic King. You can find me, like I say, you can find me on Instagram. You can go on my Facebook group, also the Ostomy Coach. You can discuss things on there. You can ask questions. I can maybe answer your questions, hopefully, and the community will all come together and possibly help you out with some of your issues, and you can connect with people. So I'll leave it there, and hope to make you another valuable video another time. Cheers, guys.